The day our college entrance exams wrapped up, the school bell dragged me straight into the quiet woods right in front of everyone. While I was still trying to process what was happening, she suddenly lunged forward and kissed me. Her sweet scent exploded in my mouth, and then her voice cracked as she broke down in tears. She sobbed, "Ziyu, I will give you my heart and absolutely everything in my future, if you just promise me one thing. My life is yours." Her sheer intensity startled me. Turns out, her mother was desperately ill and needed 600,000 for a life-saving surgery. For a rich slacker like me, that was just 2 weeks of pocket money. Still, I rejected her instantly because the heart of an icy, elite school goddess might seem priceless to others, but I just do not believe in love. My parents married for business and kept up a model couple facade for 20 years. Do people like that even have hearts? Maybe, but they gave them to their secret lovers long ago. So do not pitch romance to me. I am not buying it. I stood tall looking down at her since I towered over her by a full head. I could see her eyelashes trembling, tears clinging to them. I reached out my hand. Her entire body went rigid and she squeezed her eyes shut. Instead of anything worse, I playfully flicked her forehead. Bai Ningbing froze in shock, opening her eyes to stare in utter confusion. I pulled back my hand and locked eyes with her, staring deep into her gaze. Word by word, I said, "Bai Ningbing, let us be clear. Are you hoping I will be some opportunistic jerk, or a decent guy who shows some mercy to help you out?" She was totally blindsided, staring blankly as her brain clearly short-circuited. I had plenty of patience, so I just stood there watching her. Finally, the reality of my words clicked, and her tense shoulders slumped in total defeat. Covered in a fragile desperation, she whispered in a voice as faint as a mosquito, "Help me, I am begging you." I shook my head coldly. "No way. I am no saint. Just because I have money does not mean I will waste it on something useless to me. 600,000 is enough for dozens of luxury watches." The pleading in her eyes shattered into pure despair. Seeing her look like she was about to fall apart, my twisted amusement faded. I shifted my tone. "Look, I do not care about being a villain or a hero, but we can easily be business partners. Your top-tier grades make you a high-value prospect for the future, so I am willing to lend you the cash as a strategic investment. I can wire the 600,000 to you right now." In her eyes, a flash of unbelievable joy and shock erupted. "But I have one strict condition. In 10 years, you must pay me back a full million. The interest is low, so that should be easy for you. Simultaneously, you must secure admission to university during next month's national exams. That is the first step to proving you are worth the credit, a non-negotiable clause of this investment." Like a drowning person clutching a final lifeline, she nodded vigorously, terrified I might retract the offer. I handed her my number and spun on my heel, too bored to stick around and watch her reaction. Stepping out of the shaded woods, the sunlight felt incredibly warm against my skin. Truth be told, I did not care if she ever repaid me. 600,000 is just pocket change. Those terms were just a front. Otherwise, every random nobody would line up to beg, and no fortune survives that kind of burn rate. Still, spending 600,000 to buy a brief moment of self-satisfaction for doing good, while watching the school bell squirm in desperation, honestly was not a bad deal at all. After sorting things out with my lawyer, I casually forwarded the digital contract to Bai Ningbing, effectively closing the book on that matter. With a steady pace, I pivoted back toward my original destination, a secluded club classroom. Through the window, the scene unfolded. My childhood friend, Liu Ryan, was deep in a heated, flirtatious chat with some punk. Our families are old allies, our business empires tightly intertwined. Naturally, that meant Liu Ryan and I were essentially childhood playmates. That was fine, but the real key was her older sister, Luo Qingshu. A true prodigy, she is breathtakingly gorgeous, possesses an iron-fisted business grip, and treats me like absolute royalty. Her pocket money transfers to me are always 7 figures. For a lazy slacker like me, who just wants to coast through life, she is basically a gorgeous walking ATM. What is more, she is about to get engaged to my hypocritical, perfect brother, Zhang Xiaoyu. Soon, she will be my official sister-in-law, bringing our families even closer, setting my pampered future in stone. However, Liu Ryan has been spiraling lately over this thug. Her grades plummeted from the top tier to the mediocre middle. When Sister Qingshu personally asked me to check on her, I knew I had to step in. After all, when you take someone's money, you have to get your hands dirty. Before I could even grab the door handle, a boy burst out and collided right into me. He staggered back, stumbling over his own feet, his eyes swimming with humiliation and resentment. I recognized him instantly. He is that poor student Liu Ryan used to sponsor. He has brains and a decent personality, but looking at his pathetic expression, there is no doubt it is the classic trope. I love my helper, but she only has eyes for a bad boy. What a tragic soap opera. I just shook my head, suppressing a smirk. Poor kid, he is still too green. For people in our circle, throwing money at problems is second nature, a way to flaunt status. It does not mean we are actually virtuous. If you are grateful, grind your way to the top and repay her with cold hard cash. That is reality. Insisting on throwing emotions into it is just asking for a world of hurt. Ignoring him entirely, I pushed past the door. Liu Ryan was talking with Tang Long, laughing so hard her whole body shook. When her eyes landed on me, her smile froze, and her brow furrowed with irritation. Her gaze turned defensive and sharp. Zhang Xiaoyu, what are you doing here? Are you here to give me that breakup speech too? Don't waste your breath. You are just the Zhang family's useless failure. You can't even figure out your own life, so what right do you have to lecture me? I wasn't offended. Honestly, I found it funny. I'm not here to control you. I'm just curious how the Liu family's perfect, obedient princess fell for a guy like this. Her voice rose, dripping with pure disdain. What do you know? Long is nothing like you plastic, hypocritical rich brats. He is real, authentic, and lives a life of absolute freedom. She aggressively hooked her arm through Tang Long's, her face glowing with fanatical devotion. This is real living. Your prepackaged, robotic lives are just pathetic. You are wasting your existence. She then turned her anger back on me. Especially you, Zhang Xiaoyu. You are an academic failure, and too boring to have real fun. Without the Zhang name, you are nothing but a total loser. I nodded slowly, acting like I had just reached a profound epiphany. I see. So this is just a rebellious phase. Liu Ryan smirked, thinking she had shut me up, while Tang Long puffed his chest out, looking smug. I wasn't scared anymore. The next second, I looked down at Liu Ryan with icy eyes. Are you awake yet? She shrank back, while Tang Long kept whimpering. He was on the ground, his eyes filled with absolute terror. I stepped closer. You love being authentic, right? You crave freedom. Tell me, how does it feel right now? Feeling free yet? Tang Long was drenched in cold sweat, unable to make a sound. Liu Ryan tried to rush forward, but my sharp glare froze her instantly. Weren't you supposed to be a tough guy? Why so quiet now? He was shaking, too terrified to make a peep. Suddenly, the whole thing felt incredibly boring. Imagine being that spineless and trying to win over a rich heiress. I grabbed the trembling Liu Ryan, drove straight to the worst local slum, and dragged her out of the car, pinning her against a filthy alley wall. The stench of urine and rotting garbage hit us hard. She gagged and vomited on the spot. I pointed toward the mouth of the alley at a gang of shouting, bleach blonde punks. My voice was icy. Look, there's that rebellious vibe you love. Is it authentic enough? Is this enough freedom? If you want this, I will toss you to them right now. Her face went white. She clawed my arm with a desperate death grip, so tight she could barely breathe. I was wrong. Zhangzi, please take me home. Just then, I spotted a familiar shape in the corner of my eye. Tang Long, limping and bruised, was slipping away while I was distracted. I did not even bother chasing him. Trash like that is not worth dirtying my hands twice. Liu Ryan obviously saw him abandoning her, too. All remaining color drained from her face. Her final delusion shattered into absolute nothingness along with that coward's retreating back. She stopped struggling. She stood there like a statue, as if her soul had been completely hollowed out. I shoved her back into the car. She was silent until we arrived at the Liu estate. She opened the door and stumbled inside like a ghost. I didn't get out, just told the driver to head home. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Liu Qingshu saying thanks. I sent back a no problem emoji and considered the matter closed. For the next 2 days at the new house was eerily quiet. No one came looking for trouble. I knew my future sister-in-law had buried the scandal. My cards were played right. My cozy, pampered slack life was secure. But the next day, My smirk vanished because Tang Long was dead. An accidental car crash took him out. My future sister-in-law is far more ruthless than I ever imagined. Suddenly, this family felt terrifyingly cold. Everyone wears a polished mask while ruthlessly clearing obstacles in their path. My elite brother, John Linchuan, is exactly like that. My future sister-in-law, Liu Qingshu, is no different. I'm the only outlier, just wanting to coast. A violent shiver ran down my spine, and I bolted upright in bed. I have to get out of here right now and distance myself from these monsters. To keep slacking off, I must stay alive. Early the next morning, clutching my packed suitcase, I headed downstairs. My mother was elegantly sipping morning tea. Seeing me, she barely even bothered to lift her eyelids. Her voice was flat. "Where are you going?" "Just finding a new spot to sleep." She didn't press, returning to her financial magazine. My father was likely in some unknown corner, leaving this house feeling like a frozen tomb. Gripping my suitcase, I marched out of that opulent villa without looking back. I owned a luxury penthouse in the city center. Now was the perfect time to use it. The apartment was massive but hauntingly empty, and the fridge was bare. I drove straight to the district's largest supermarket. I needed to hoard enough supplies and junk food to make this sterile place feel like home. Pushing my cart, I navigated the dazzling aisles, moving like a soulless shopping drone. I tossed items inside with a blank face. Rounding a sharp corner, I froze. There, in a quiet spot in the snack aisle, I spotted a young girl acting highly suspicious, trying to hide a loaf of bread up her sleeve. She looked younger than me, petite and fragile, dressed in a school uniform washed into a faded gray. Her face was remarkably pure and clean, though her current actions were not. I watched silently, leaning casually against a display shelf with crossed arms, amused by her clumsy struggle. She was failing this heist. Her sleeve was far too narrow and the bread was too bulky. She fumbled through several desperate attempts, nervous sweat breaking out on her forehead. Sensing a presence, she went rigid and slowly, fearfully raised her head. Our gazes collided in the stale supermarket air. I stared in heavy silence. Over 10 agonizing seconds, her face flushed from ghostly pale to a deep crimson. Those wide eyes first flooded with terror, then panic, before finally drowning in deep, agonizing shame. The hand clutching the bread shook so violently that a soft thud echoed as the loaf slipped and hit the floor. It was as if all life had drained out of her, leaving her defeated. She kept her head down, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor. I strolled over, leaned down, and snatched up the fallen loaf, tossing it in my cart. Then I began grabbing cookies and candies off the shelves, tossing them inside without a second thought. Soon, my cart was piled high. I pushed the trolley right up to her. She was still staring down at her feet, rigid as if awaiting a death sentence. I used the tip of my shoe to gently tap those faded, worn-out canvas sneakers of hers. My tone was flat, too broke to afford a meal. Her body jolted, and she gave a tiny nod. But a second later, remembering something, she shook her head violently. Losing my patience, I snapped, "Are you performing a mime act? What is the actual deal here? Speak up." My voice grew sharper. She flinched, terrified by my harshness, and snapped her head up. Her eyes were red and brimming with tears. Her lips parted, trying to form words, but only muffled, incoherent sounds escaped her throat while her hands gestured frantically. I froze in that split second as a sudden realization hit me. She was mute. Watching her look so desperate and helpless, all my irritation vanished. I felt a wave of genuine regret. In that moment, I felt like an absolute, greatest scumbag. The kind of guy who looks back at his actions at midnight and wants to slap himself across the face. It is 10:14:17:47. Is this six saying another word? I turned, grabbed a second cart, and filled it with non-perishable food. Pushed both carts, gesturing for her to follow. She seemed to be still processing. Not wanting to explain, I grabbed her wrist and marched to the checkout. I carried the massive haul of bags myself while she followed closely like a shadow, clutching some light snack bags to her chest. I packed my sports car and signaled her to get in. She hesitated before she finally pulled the passenger door open and slid inside. I immediately asked for her address. She took my phone, her tiny fingers tapping away at the screen for quite some time. She finally pinned a specific address. It was tucked deep in the old district, a rundown slum I wouldn't ever drive through under normal circumstances. I kept those thoughts to myself. I simply revved the engine to life. The silence during our drive was hauntingly heavy. She kept her eyes glued to her lap, her knuckles white as she gripped the hem of her shirt. My car navigated through narrow, crumbling alleyways before finally coming to a halt in front of a decrepit, rickety tenement building that looked ready to collapse. I killed the engine and helped her lug the groceries out. The stairwell was pitch black and damp, reeking of thick mildew and some foul, mystery stench. She led me up to the third floor and pushed open a peeling wooden door, releasing a wave of pungent medicinal herbs that hit me instantly. The apartment was minuscule, so small you could see every inch of it at a glance. The phrase dirt poor finally had a concrete meaning for me today. On a battered, makeshift wooden bed lay an elderly woman, looking like nothing but skin and bones. Her eyes were tightly shut, her breathing faint and shallow. The girl set the bags down and rushed to the bedside to tuck the old woman in, her eyes shimmering with raw anxiety. The pieces of the puzzle finally clicked. It wasn't just that she was starving. She had absolutely no money left for her family's medical bills. She stole that bread at her breaking point, refusing to touch the meager funds saved for the old woman's care. Another tragic sob story, right? I have always been a total sucker for this kind of drama. After settling her grandmother, the girl stepped toward me, bowed deeply, and grabbed a tattered notebook from the table, scribbling something at a frantic pace. Her handwriting was surprisingly elegant and neat. It read, "Thank you so much. How much did all this cost? I promise I will pay you back every single cent." Looking at those words, I almost felt like laughing. Pay me back with what, exactly? By pulling another heist at the supermarket? I remained silent, simply reaching for my smartphone and dialed our family's private assistant. Leaning against the wall, I said curtly, "Old Wang, make the necessary arrangements for a private VIP suite at the Central Hospital. Dispatch an ambulance to the West District tenements in 15 minutes. I am sending the coordinates now. Charge every single cent to my personal account." The entire call took less than 60 seconds. The girl was completely thunderstruck. She stood there, mouth agape, staring at me blankly. She even forgot to cry or continue writing. I could understand her shock. To someone like her, something that would take a lifetime of desperate wishing to obtain was nothing more than a problem I solved with a quick call. I nudged the duffel bag at her feet with my toe. "Why are you standing there? Pack your things. We are heading to the hospital." She snapped out of her trance instantly, scrambling frantically and clumsily to pack. In truth, there was not much worth taking, just some faded, thread-bare outfits and a chipped ceramic bowl. The ambulance arrived with impressive speed. Professional paramedics moved with precision and care, hoisting the elderly woman onto the stretcher. Throughout the process, the girl gripped my sleeve tightly, as if terrified I might suddenly vanish into thin air. Though I felt awkward, I did not pull away. Once we hit the hospital, everything was organized with surgical efficiency. A private suite with round-the-clock nursing care and a team of top specialists immediately began their consultation. I stood outside the pristine, sun-drenched ward, observing the flurry of activity from the doctors and nurses, and that fragile girl by the bedside, looking both utterly overwhelmed and profoundly grateful. The dark, lingering shadows cast by Tong Long's sudden death seemed to dissipate just a little. It turns out, blowing cash really is the best way to buy a good mood. Suddenly, I felt a gentle tug on my shirt again. She held up that tattered notebook, thrusting it before my eyes. It read, "How can I ever repay your incredible kindness?" I leaned against the doorframe, looking down. I never said I needed repayment. She grew anxious, her pen flying across the paper until her handwriting became a frantic scrawl. "No, I cannot just take your money for nothing. You are a good person." The moment I saw those words, my smirk widened. In this day and age, even someone like me counts as a saint. God, being rich is convenient. I cut off her frantic scribbling mid-sentence. First off, I am definitely not a good person. Second, I told you I despise complications. Standing here arguing with me is just causing me more trouble. Got it? She looked dazed by my twisted logic, staring at me with a blank expression, unsure of how she was supposed to respond. Looking at her pathetic state, I let out a weary sigh, stepped forward to end the small talk, and snatched the notebook and pen from her hands. I scribbled across the page with aggressive strokes. Think of this as early insurance. Just focus on your studies and get into a top-tier university. If I ever hit rock bottom one day and end up begging for scraps on the street, just remember to give me a bowl of rice. I shoved the notebook back into her trembling hands. She stared at my writing, frozen, and then finally looked up. In those eyes, as clear as a mountain spring, tears finally spilled over. She did not make a sound, letting the silent droplets fall one by one onto the tattered homework book. Feeling awkward, I jerked my gaze away. All right, enough with the waterworks. Your grandmother still needs you. Wailing like this helps nobody. I paused, then added, what school do you go to? I will have old Juan cover your tuition while he is at it. From now on, I will have him transfer 5,000 for your monthly expenses until you graduate, and don't you dare say no. Consider this part of the insurance premium. I was done with this overly sentimental scene. After giving the doctors a few brief instructions, I turned on my heel and left. As I cruised down the wide-open highway, a sudden sense of irony washed over me. Could a prestigious Zhang family heir ever actually go broke? Yeah, right. Like that would ever happen. I was simply burning cash to buy myself some good karma. After all, looking at the people around me, each one more cold-blooded and ruthless than the last, I figured I needed a massive stockpile of merit just to ensure a slacker like me could enjoy a lifetime of luxury and excess. Then, I hit rock bottom 5 years later, only 5 short years. My supposedly elite, perfect brother, John Linchuan, following his marriage, when that scandal finally exploded, I was lounging on a private island, soaking up the sun. When my phone rang, I actually felt like laughing. It was exactly what I had predicted. That brother of mine has always been an indecisive, spineless coward at his core, yet he insisted on playing the part of a devoted, deeply romantic gentleman. I could not even be bothered to fly back for such a farce. Rich family dramas always boil down to the same old garbage until my credit cards started getting declined one after another. Every single property under my name, all my stocks and funds, were seized overnight. Only then did I belatedly realize that something had gone horribly wrong. By the time I frantically flew back from the island, the dust had already settled on my ruin. The Zhang Group had officially changed its name to Liu. My father was indicted on multiple counts of white-collar crime, with endless evidence surfacing. For the rest of his life, he would be singing the blues behind bars. My brother, John Linchuan, was kicked out without a penny, and somehow a useless waste like me, who just wanted to coast, was not spared from the carnage either. The private fortune I had spent 20 years meticulously hoarding was gone, all of it. I stood at the entrance of my luxury penthouse, staring down the gatekeepers to expressionless bodyguards in black suits. My brain was literally throbbing. Look, sis, if you want revenge, go ahead and take it. You could have liquidated my brainless brother, and I wouldn't have raised a single objection. But sending my old man to prison and gutting the entire Zhang estate, what the hell is that about? The more I thought about it, the more my blood boiled. Was I seriously trapped in some strong female lead's revenge novel, cast as the collateral damage? Just useless cannon fodder swept away in the crossfire. Right at that moment, the heavy doors swung open. Liu Qingshu was perched on my favorite Italian leather sofa, gracefully swirling a crystal wine glass. 5 years had passed, and she'd grown even more stunning yet far colder. That aura of absolute, ruthless dominance she projected was suffocating. As her eyes met mine, she set her glass down and offered a deceptively gentle little smile. Oh, see, you're back. I didn't say a word, just glared at her with intense hatred. She stood up, closing the distance between us step by step, reaching out to touch my cheek. Don't look at me like that. I truly didn't want this. I jerked my head away, dodging her hand. She didn't retract it, merely continuing in a slow, deliberate drawl. Your brother was too slow-witted. I granted him plenty of opportunities, but unfortunately, he failed to cherish them. Liu Qingshu shook her head, her expression shifting into something dark and playful. So that's your justification for destroying my entire family. She paused for a heartbeat, her voice laced with a seductive, manipulative charm. But things are different now. He was the one who betrayed me first. My retribution is only natural. Currently, I have no need for a husband. As she spoke, she took another predatory step toward me, radiating an aggressive, overwhelming pressure. Tell me, are you interested in staying here to keep me company? I can take care of you, just like the old days. Hearing this, I laughed so hard tears welled up. Wiping my eyes, I stared straight into Lu Tingchu's flawless porcelain face. Judging by that twisted logic, I'm starting to wonder if you personally orchestrated his downfall. Her smile instantly twitched and froze. It was only for a fleeting microsecond, but I caught it. Any last shred of hope in my heart instantly evaporated, just as I thought. This woman has been a total psychopath from the very start. She stopped at nothing to get exactly what she wants. I wiped the grin from my face, staring her down with an icy, expressionless gaze before slowly, deliberately raising my middle finger to her face. The last trace of a smile vanished, replaced by a void of bone-chilling indifference. "Ungrateful brat," she said, giving a dismissive wave of her hand, not even deigning to look at me again. Two massive bodyguards lunged forward, immediately flanking me and hoisting me up like a helpless, scrawny chick. I was violently tossed right out of my own front door. Standing in the hollow silence of the corridor, I let out a bitter, mocking laugh. If I'd actually bought her twisted lies and stayed until she got bored of her little toy, I probably wouldn't even know how I died. I knew damn well I was no match for her. Even a cunning old fox like my father fell victim to her ruthless schemes. A useless playboy who only knows how to party. What hope did I have of winning? I needed to stay far away from that psycho. Staying alive was all that mattered now. I whipped out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, looking for the brothers who used to call me Young Master daily. I punched in the first number. "Yo, Young Master Joe, it's Zhang Zi." There was a suffocating, 3-second silence on the other end. "Who is this?" a cautious voice asked. "Sorry, wrong number." The line went dead. I froze, completely stunned, before a self-deprecating smirk crept onto my face. I moved on and dialed the second one. The result was a carbon copy. The third, the fourth, they either claimed it was a wrong number or simply refused to pick up at all. Leaning against the freezing wall, I began purging those so-called friends from my contacts, one by one. By the time I reached the bottom, my screen was a desolate wasteland, save for a few useless family numbers. I scrambled to liquidate every valuable item I had left. Altogether, it barely scraped together 100,000 bucks. In my past life, that measly amount wouldn't even cover one night's bar tab. Now, it was my entire net worth. Wandering aimlessly through the city streets, I somehow ended up right beneath my old apartment. I let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. Maybe I should just get a factory job and tighten bolts all day. Low barrier to entry, plus it comes with food and housing. I've had more than enough of high society life over the past 20 years. Walking with my head down, lost in grim calculations, I suddenly bumped straight into someone soft. A faint, refreshing fragrance wafted into my senses. I instinctively opened my mouth to apologize, but as I looked up, I was pulled into a pair of crystal-clear eyes. It was a girl with remarkably delicate features, looking incredibly familiar, though I couldn't place where we had met. She, however, recognized me instantly. I saw it the very second she realized who I was. Her eyes lit up with unspeakable joy and relief. Her lips parted, as if she were desperately trying to find her voice, but remembering her reality. She simply reached into her pocket and frantically pulled out a smartphone, her fingers flying across the screen as she typed. The display flashed a single line, "Mr. Zhang, do you still remember me?" I stared at the words, "Mr. Zhang." Not many people would address me so respectfully now. I studied her face, and fragments of my memory began clicking into place. Suddenly, it hit me like a lightning bolt. I was genuinely stunned. 5 years ago, that trembling girl in the supermarket corner, from that decrepit shack, caring for her grandmother, it's you. Her eyes ignited with a brilliant light as she nodded with all her might, pure, unadulterated happiness practically overflowing from her clear gaze. I was even more baffled. "How did you end up here?" She quickly typed another message and thrust the phone toward my face. The screen read, "I saw the news about the Zhang family's collapse. I was so worried. I guessed you might come back here, so I've been waiting right here since yesterday morning." My heart felt as if it had been struck by a heavy sledgehammer. That meant during the 24 hours since I was kicked out, she had been waiting right here, beneath the apartment building I could no longer enter. Using the most clumsy, earnest way imaginable to guard a single, uncertain possibility, a surge of complex emotions washed over me. While my entire circle of so-called brothers were busy scrubbing me from their lives, A girl I'd almost completely forgotten stood a day and night vigil for me. I twitched my lips, trying to find words, but she seemed to sense my utter humiliation. Her screen lit up again. Do you have nowhere else to go? My silence was my admission. She tucked her phone away and made a move I never could have anticipated. She reached out and gently tugged the cuff of my hoodie. Her grip was incredibly faint, and I could have easily shaken her off, but that slight, pleading pressure transmitted through my sleeve felt like an invisible, unbreakable chain, rooting me to the spot. She pulled me along as she turned the corner. Driven by some strange impulse, I didn't resist, simply following behind her like a lost soul. We arrived at a tiny, quaint bakery bathed in a warm amber glow. The sign read Glimmer Bakery. The shop was officially closed for the night, but the display window remained softly lit. Unlocking the door, she glanced back, signaling for me to follow. The space inside was small but impeccably tidy, the air thick with the comforting scent of cream and toasted grain. From beneath the counter, she pulled out a laminated folder and withdrew a single, slightly yellowed sheet of paper, sliding it across the counter toward me. It was my own messy, flamboyant handwriting from 5 years ago. An insurance policy if I ever hit rock bottom and ended up begging on the streets. Remember to give me a bowl of rice. She pointed to my arrogant words, then to me, herself, and the shop. Her gaze, she was so earnest, like she was fulfilling a sacred promise. Finally, she turned, pulling a warm, golden croissant from the oven and offering it with both hands. There wasn't a single trace of pity or patronizing sympathy, just a simple, direct look that said, "It's my turn now." I took the bread and bit in. Honestly, the flavor couldn't match the elite, high-end dishes I was used to, but it brought me a deep sense of peace. "Are you guys hiring?" I asked. She blinked, startled, and then a brilliant, beautiful smile lit up her face. She nodded her head with absolute conviction. That day, my chaotic, hedonistic past life officially ended, and the next chapter of my existence became deeply bound to this tiny little shop and my new boss, the quiet girl I thought I would never see again. Her name is Sue. Using the money I once gave her, combined with her own hard-won savings, she opened this bakery on this very street right after college. The shop is small, but business is actually thriving. The neighborhood folks seem to have a real soft spot for her. They go out of their way to buy bread and linger for some neighborhood gossip. The poor girl struggled alone for so long. It is great she finally has an assistant now. He looks reliable, wearing an apron with a cartoon bear on it. I awkwardly wrapped the fresh toast. Hearing their chatter, my heart did not even skip a beat. Rely on me, I was a useless rich kid who could not tell wheat from chaff. How did they see reliability in me? Still, my presence undeniably made her heavy workload lighter. At least for the heavy lifting, like mixing flour and carrying sugar bags. She did not have to push through it alone anymore as a fragile girl. When we closed the shop at night, we headed upstairs to that tiny, cramped apartment. If her old shack was dirt poor, then this place was only a single step above a jail cell. One dining table, 2 rickety chairs, a worn-out couch, and a tiny space partitioned off the balcony that became my bedroom. It was smaller than my old villa's guest bathroom, yet I slept more soundly than I had in the past 20 years. No schemes, no fake smiles. There was only the gentle, sweet scent of wheat drifting from downstairs. I started learning how to act like a normal human. I learned how to sweep without raising a dust storm, and how to use a pressure cooker without blowing up the kitchen. Most of the time, it was a complete disaster. I once swapped salt for sugar, making a horribly salty batch of red bean paste. She took a bite, her face squeezing into a ball of sheer pain. But she did not spit it out. She just silently downed a huge glass of water, then wrote in her notebook, "The flavor is unique, maybe less sugar next time." Seeing her dead serious face, I was annoyed but wanted to burst out laughing. I snatched the bowl and threw it in the trash. Right then, I decided to learn sign language. I bought a pile of textbooks. Every night after she slept, I would stay in my balcony room practicing hand signs in front of my phone screen. I started with a simple hello and thank you to good job and good night. When I finally used my clumsy hand gestures to tell her good morning for the first time, she stood there frozen. In those eyes that were normally so calm, it felt like 1,000 stars had suddenly ignited. They were incredibly bright. She raised her hands, replying with pure sincerity. Right then, I knew that in the last 2 decades, I had never felt so genuinely alive. It was the feeling of doing something truly meaningful. Days blended into weeks, then months, and life slowly started to improve. I went from a total klutz who could not even use an oven to a real baking apprentice, expertly whipping cream and piping delicate patterns. Our business boomed to the point where we rented the shop next door to expand our little business. My bank account grew again, not a massive fortune, but plenty to rent my own apartment. I wanted to bring this up to Sue several times, but the words kept getting stuck in my throat. Move out where? Eating alone is depressing anyway, right? Plus, running a shop solo is tough. She needs the extra help I offer. I piled up excuses in my head just to justify staying here forever. Sue never mentioned it either. She seemed to have quietly accepted my presence. I have never believed in true love. My father and brother were the perfect warnings against that. But this deep peace I found with Sue was becoming an addiction I could not break. I shook my head, trying to clear away these complicated thoughts. It was almost noon, time to head upstairs and make her lunch. I was just taking off my apron when, right then, a painfully familiar figure pushed open the door and walked in. She was wearing a sharp, custom-tailored suit. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was styled into a neat, professional bun. She used the aura of a powerful executive from every pore. It was Bai Ningbing. After 5 years, the stench of poverty and desperation she once carried had been wiped away without a trace. She was no longer that girl in the faded uniform, the icy beauty who begged for my help. Now, she was polite, perfect, and poised. Behind her walked a young man in his early 20s, wearing a sharp suit with the fresh look of a college graduate. The stare he gave me was filled with blatant contempt, likely some male assistant. Bai Ningbing's gaze lingered on my silly cartoon bear apron. For a fleeting, awkward second, her brow furrowed in a tiny frown, but she quickly pulled her professional mask back on. Zhang Xiaoyu, it has been a long time, she said. I gave a quick nod, not pausing as I kept untying my apron. She seemed to want to ask something, but thought better of it, finally pulling a check from her designer bag and sliding it across the counter. Here is 1 million. I know we still have years left on our 10-year pact, but I can afford it now, so I wanted to settle this early. I looked at the zeros, took the paper, and shoved it into my pocket. Thanks, it is what you owe me, though I never expected to see a dime. Her assistant, seeing how quickly I pocketed the cash, showed an even deeper look of disgust. Bai Ningbing quickly composed her face, her eyes scanning our modest little bakery before locking back onto me. I knew that look all too well. It was that classic, high-end mighty look of pity. Xiaoyu, I heard about what happened to your family, she said. If you need a place, you can work at my company. My husband and I just started our firm, and we need staff. Watching her play this role of the merciful savior made my stomach churn. Back then, that money was a cold investment. Now, paying it back, we should have been even. Yet, here she was, putting on a show to flip the script and turn her former predator into a charity case. I glanced at the assistant beside her, whose glare was growing more hostile, and suddenly everything clicked. She was getting off on the thrill of saving me, just as I once enjoyed watching her drown in desperation. Now she was reveling in my downfall, but she was far more hypocritical than I ever was, hiding her spite behind a mask of kindness. I shut her down with an icy refusal. No thanks, I am doing just fine right here. The perfect smile on Bai Ningbing's face instantly slipped. Xiaoyu, do not be stubborn or spiteful. I know the kind of lifestyle you used to have. I cut her off mid-sentence, my voice dripping with pure impatience. I said, no thanks. She finally stopped pushing, though a flash of irritation crossed her beautiful face. Fine, since you have made up your mind, I will not force my help on you. The moment she turned to leave, her assistant stepped forward eagerly, reaching out to support her arm. Ningbing leaned in and flashed him a warm smile that looked way too intimate for a boss and her assistant. Guided by pure instinct, I casually lifted my phone and quietly snapped a quick photo. The angle was perfect. In the shot, his hand was almost touching her waist, and her expression was something no sensible person would call professional. I casually pocketed my phone and waved them off with a dismissive shrug, whispering a silent goodbye. Safe travels, and do not let the door hit you on your way out. Right after, I spent exactly 2.5 minutes finding her husband's public email online. I sent the damning picture anonymously, then immediately wiped the file and all my digital tracks. With my mood instantly lifted, I finished a quiet lunch with Juwei. As my mind finally settled, I leaned against the counter and started planning how to spend this $1 million windfall. Staring at the check felt completely surreal. It had been forever since I held this much money. At least now, our daily lives would be free from constant penny pinching. I could finally buy the bakery equipment Suwei has been dreaming of. The more I planned, the more excited I got. $1 million holds serious power. Suddenly, the shop door chime gave a sharp jingle, and a sweet, overly dramatic voice shattered my daydream. Ziyu. I spun around only to find Liu Ryan standing right there. Talk about an unwanted reunion. If my memory serves me right, her pathetic loser of a husband, Chen Wang, has not even been dead for the full years. Can I help you with something? I asked, leaning back with a cold, unreadable expression. She bit her lip, her eyes watering on cue. Her damsel in distress routine made me want to gag. Her voice trembled with fake sadness as she stammered, I just really needed to see you. Miss Liu, what kind of drama are you trying to sell me now? I almost laughed out loud at her nerve. Instantly, her eyes turned red as if she had suffered some grand injustice. Ziyu, I know I was incredibly foolish back then. I made so many horrible mistakes. I always chased after some wild, chaotic romance, but I finally see that all I ever really wanted was a peaceful home. Her voice carried a hint of fake sincerity, her eyes heavy with forced longing. She looked up, staring into my soul with misty, tear-filled eyes, trying to look affectionate. Zhang Xiaoyu, let us start over, okay? I know about the mess you are in. My sister went too far this time, but it does not matter to me. I am willing to take care of you. Her voice was dripping with sickening pity. What a classic prodigal daughter routine. But let us get one thing straight. When did we ever start? I barely kept myself from rolling my eyes. My mind drifted back to her wedding with that charity case student, Chen Wang. It was a massive, overly dramatic show where she sobbed at the altar, calling him the light of her life. I stood in the crowd, watching that poor, emotionally fragile idiot of a groom cry his eyes out. I remember thinking, this guy is absolutely cooked. Sure enough, less than 2 years later, the spark died, and Liu Ryan got bored of her supposed soulmate. She immediately replaced him with a new guy. Luckily, that kid was not a complete pushover. He managed to gather some highly incriminating evidence against Liu Ryan to protect himself, but then he suddenly died. What a convenient little tragedy. I would bet my life that my former sister-in-law, Liu Qingshu, was pulling the strings. Snapping back to the present, I stared at Liu Ryan, who was still deeply committed to her tearful performance as the grieving, devoted widow. My smirk grew wider by the second. Liu Ryan, do you honestly think every man is a fool? Her face instantly froze. Your husband's funeral was quite a spectacle, I remarked. I spoke with a slow, deliberate drawl. I saw you on the news, crying so hysterically. It was a performance to move anyone to tears. Such a shame, though. If only I had not been outside that hotel that very night, watching someone who looked exactly like you cling to a handsome guy in the elevator. She turned completely pale. Oh, and that pretty boy did not stay lucky for long before falling off a building, did he? Liu Ryan, are you not exhausted? I stepped closer, glaring right into her trembling eyes. Does wearing a mask and pretending every single day not make you sick? I pressured her until she stumbled back, hitting the door frame, shaking uncontrollably. You are lying, she hissed, trying to sound brave, but her voice cracked. I was done wasting my breath on her. I did not care if she wanted revenge. A woman obsessed with acting like a tragic saint would never dare to lose her cool or snap in public. Her reputation is far too important to her. That fake persona is practically glued to her face. I coldly told her to get out. Like a prisoner getting a sudden pardon, she practically ran for her life. She stumbled and scrambled her way out, looking absolutely pathetic. Finally, peace returned to the bakery. I let out a long, heavy sigh of relief. It felt like I had finally washed away 5 years of toxic drama. Then, soft footsteps came from upstairs. Suwei walked down, holding a bowl of fresh dessert. She offered it to me, her eyes silently asking what had just happened. I shook my head to tell her it was nothing. Suwei signed back, her face clouded with worrying, gesturing that I did not look happy. Staring into her clear eyes, I smiled and signed back clumsily, telling her I was fine. She understood immediately. A beautiful smile spread across her face. Golden sunlight poured through the window, wrapping us in a warm, peaceful glow. From that day on, I decided to completely leave my old social circle behind. I cut every single tie. Now, my only goal is to run this small bakery with Sue and lead a peaceful life. Every morning at 5 a.m., I wake up 30 minutes before her. I head downstairs to start the first batch of bread. By the time she walks down, looking sleepy, the kitchen smells of warm wheat, and the water is boiling. She always signs a sweet good morning to me, then ties her apron to start preparing the daily desserts. We barely speak, yet our movements are perfectly in sync. When the morning rush gets busy, I will hand her a cold glass of water. Her fingers sometimes brush against my hand when she takes it. Cool, soft, and electric. I have noticed all her little habits, and she is finally comfortable around me. My life feels completely full now. We run this shop together by day, and at night, she teaches me to bake complex pastries. Sometimes, we spend entire evenings together talking deeply without needing any pen or paper. This connection brings me a peace I have never felt before. I am starting to think about a major step. I want to marry her. I still do not quite believe in romance, but I believe some people are meant to be. I just want to stay by her side forever. 3 months later, I finally confessed my feelings. Actually, I proposed. It was her birthday, and I kept the whole thing a secret, setting up a surprise in the shop. When she came downstairs that evening, the entire bakery was glowing with warm candlelight. She froze at the bottom of the steps, covering her mouth in shock. I walked over and dropped to one knee. Kneeling before her, I pulled out a diamond ring. Sue, I don't do fancy words or poetry, and I never believed in forever. But I want to run this shop with you, until we are too old to walk. Will you marry me? She burst into tears, droplets spilling like broken pearls on the floor, nodding her head with all her might. She held out her hand, letting me slide the ring on. It was a bit loose on her slender finger, but she clenched her fist to keep it safe. I pulled her into a tight embrace, breathing in the delicate scent of her hair. I realized the first 20 years of my life were just a long, slow rehearsal for the moment I met her. Our wedding ceremony was modest and simple, no grand, sprawling venue. We just invited our local neighbors and a few old classmates I'm still close with. True friends, the real ones. I didn't care about a flashy vanity project. I just wanted to give her a beautiful, dignified wedding. The day before, I got a fresh haircut and bought a sharp, respectable suit. We chose Sue's wedding dress together. When she tried it on, she was glowing. Standing outside the fitting room, watching her in the mirror, it felt completely surreal. This angelic, breathtaking girl was actually about to become my wife. Everything went beautifully on our big day. Sue's grandmother had recovered enough to attend in her wheelchair. The sweet old woman took my hand, whispering weakly, "Thank you. Please take care of our precious Wei." A wave of shyness hit me. Honestly, she is the one taking care of me. When it was time to exchange rings, Sue was trembling. I gently clasped her hands in mine and whispered a soft reassurance in her ear. "Don't be nervous, it's just a formality." She let out a soft giggle, and the tension evaporated. "Mr. Zhang Xiaoyu, do you take Miss Sue as your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and protect forever?" "I do." "And Miss Sue, do you take Mr. Zhang Xiaoyu as your lawful wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, to love and respect forever?" Sue couldn't speak, but she nodded with every ounce of her strength, before signing with her hands, "I do." The officiant stood frozen, unsure of what to do. I smiled warmly and translated, "She says she's all in." Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd. When we turned to seal it with a kiss, she blushed a deep, vibrant crimson. I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers, a touch as light as a feather, treating her like a fragile treasure. I whispered, "Mrs. Young, I'm in your hands now." She giggled, her shoulders shaking with pure joy. My old classmates crowded around to toast us. A close roommate from back then patted my shoulder. "Xiaoyu, you've changed. You used to have this totally jaded, cynical attitude. Now, you finally look like a real human being." I glanced over at Sue chatting happily with her grandmother and smiled. I guess that's what happens when someone matters. Once the party finally wound down, we returned to our little upstairs sanctuary. Everything was exactly the same, except for the vibrant explosion of wedding bouquets and a pile of gifts cluttering the floor. Sue slipped out of her gown, changed into cozy loungewear, and started cooking us a late-night snack. I stood leaning against the door, watching her quiet silhouette. A sudden wave of deep contentment washed over me. This right here was the life I craved, just to people living a simple, honest existence. She walked over with the steaming food and playfully waved a hand in front of my dazed face. "What are you thinking about?" "About you." She blushed instantly, giving me a playful swat on the arm. She scribbled in her notebook, "Zhang Xiaoyu, we're officially married. Any regrets?" I shook my head. "None." "What about you?" "None either. It just feels surreal, like a dream." I reached out and gently pinched her cheek. "Does that hurt?" She glared, rubbed her face, and wrote, "This isn't a dream. And I love you." As Sue penned those 3 heavy words, her fingers trembled slightly under the ember lamp. Her eyelashes fluttered like a rain-soaked butterfly's wings. Staring at those words, my heart felt a powerful jolt. This wasn't the shallow rush of a high school crush, nor some hollow ego boost from spending lots of money. It was a sweet, heavy ache in my chest, wrapped in absolute security. Taking the pen, I closed her notebook and teased, "Now, Mrs. Yoon, writing stuff like this so late, trying to keep me awake." She waved her hands frantically, her blushing face turning bright red as she signed, "But it is the truth." I sighed softly and pulled her close, resting my chin on her soft hair. I know." The girl in my arms finally grew still, her breath tickling my neck. In that moment, I realized, to hell with the Zhang family fortune, and to hell with people like Liu Chengshu and Bai Ningbing. What I have now is priceless. It is worth more than everything I owned in my first 20 years. But fate is cruel, tripping you up when you're happiest. Still, our early marriage was like dough rising in a warm oven, radiating warmth and fulfillment. We rose at 4 a.m. to knead fresh dough, and by 6, hot croissants were ready, filling the air. Sue tried to teach me to pipe frosting, but my clumsy hands made a total mess. She never lost her patience, though, gently guiding my fingers inch by inch to correct my form. When the afternoon rush died down, she would nap on the counter. Golden sunlight filtered through the glass storefront, casting soft, dancing shadows across her face. I often stared at her sleeping form, wondering how someone could stay so incredibly pure in this dirty world. But mud always finds a way to splatter. One stormy, rain-slick night, just as we were closing up, several reeking, drunken men barged through the glass doors. Leading them was a local bottom feeder named Brother Kiang, who had tried to extort protection money before. Now, reeking of cheap booze, he kicked over our potted plant at the entrance, yelling arrogantly, "Mute girl, get your ass out here." Sue was tallying the day's accounts and flinched at the noise, looking to me for safety. I shoved her behind me, grabbing a heavy rolling pin. Brother Kiang grinned maliciously, exposing rotted yellow teeth. "Young Master Young thinks he's a big shot now. Heard you married a mute, so the boys and I came to celebrate." The thugs laughed jeeringly, their oily gazes locked on Sue. It made my skin crawl. I gripped the rolling pin until my knuckles turned white. "Get out." "Oh, look at him playing the knight." He stepped closer, spraying alcohol-laden breath in my face. "Wanna lose your shop?" Suddenly, Sue stepped out, clutching freshly baked cookies. In her trembling hands, she forced a desperate smile, gesturing frantically that the cookies were a peace offering. In that instant, my heart was pierced by a needle. This fool, she actually thought kindness could disarm pure malice. Brother Kiang violently swiped the box away, scattering cookies across the floor. "Who wants this garbage?" He lunged to grab Sue by the wrist, and I completely snapped. I hurled the rolling pin at his head. In the absolute chaos, I ignored the blows I took, just shielding Sue in the corner. The distant wail of police sirens made the thugs scatter like rats. Sue's hands trembled, wiping blood from my lip as heavy tears cascaded down her cheeks. She struggled to make even a single sound. I wiped my face and forced a grin. "What's with the waterworks? Your man isn't dead yet." That only made her sob harder, burying herself deep into my embrace. Like a terrified, wounded animal, she clung to my arm until dawn. She jolted awake the second I tried to move. Staring at the dark circles under her eyes, a surge of fierce, protective instinct flared inside me. What if I hadn't been able to protect her today? The very next morning, I searched a second-hand market for a solid steel rod and hid it securely beneath our shop counter. When Sue saw it, She frantically shook her head in protest. I tapped the cold steel rod and signed to her, self-defense. Hopefully, we'll never need it. She lowered her eyes, scribbling a single line in her notebook. I'm just afraid you will get hurt. Well, I am even more terrified of anything happening to you. I gently ruffled her hair. Sue, you're all I have left now. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, before finally giving a soft, resigned nod. But our peaceful days did not last long. Soon, Liu Ryan reappeared like a lingering ghost. She did not even set foot inside the shop this time. Instead, she parked a flashy red sports car right at the curb. Sunglasses hid half her face as she beckoned me with a finger. I was busy kneading dough and could not be bothered to entertain her. She eventually stepped out, leaning against the car door with a smirk. Zhang Xiaoyu, does your little wife know how you helped Bai Ningbing? Her voice dripped with pure provocation. My grip faltered and the heavy bag of flour slammed onto the floor, kicking up a blinding white cloud of dust. Sue hurried out from the shop at the sound, looking between us in utter confusion. Liu Ryan slid off her sunglasses, her eyes raking over Sue with blatant, condescending pity. How pathetic. Stuck with a useless failure who couldn't even afford a decent wedding. I clenched my fists so hard the veins in my temples began to throb. Liu Ryan, shut your damn mouth. What? Are you scared now? You weren't this sensitive back then when that ice queen was begging at your feet. Didn't you just love the thrill of playing God? Don't act like a devoted saint now. Sue couldn't understand a word Liu Ryan said, but she could feel the suffocating tension in the air. She gently tugged on the hem of my shirt, her eyes overflowing with worrying. I took a sharp, jagged breath, forcing the white-hot rage back down. I turned to Sue and signed, "It's fine. Just go back inside." Sue hesitated, rooted to the spot, but Liu Ryan suddenly pulled out her phone and blasted an audio recording at full volume. It was Bai Ningbing's voice from years ago, trembling and thick with suppressed sobs. "I'll give you my heart, Ziyu. I'll give you everything I have, as long as you promise me one thing." "I'm no philanthropist," my own recorded voice replied. Sue's face turned ashen in an instant. She looked at me, then back at Liu Ryan, her lips trembling without a single sound escaping them. Liu Ryan tucked her phone away with a satisfied smirk. "Honey, you really think he's some kind of hero? He only helped Bai Ningbing because he enjoyed watching her suffer. Helping you was probably just a fleeting whim, too. You are talking absolute garbage." I completely lost my composure, lunging forward to snatch the phone from her hand. Liu Ryan shrieked and scrambled back into her car, slamming the door lock shut. The sports car roared away into the distance, leaving me and Sue standing in a cloud of settling dust. She kept her head bowed low, her shoulders trembling slightly. I reached out to touch her, but she instead instinctively recoiled. That single step back felt like a jagged blade plunging straight into my chest. After the shop closed, the atmosphere in our attic was suffocating. Sue kept her back to me as she made the bed, stubbornly refusing to meet my eyes. I finally took her by the shoulders and forced her to face me. "Do you actually believe her lies?" Sue bit her lip hard, tears pooling and swirling in her eyes. She scribbled in her notebook. Was she telling the truth? Yes, but also no. I wiped my face in frustration and explained exactly how I had rejected Bai Ningbing, recounting the cold reality of that contract from beginning to end. "Sue, I admit I'm no saint, but with you, it was never about charity." She remained silent for a long time, so long that I feared she would never speak to me again. Finally, her hands moved slowly. "I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that one day you'll find me boring and discard me." Her fingers shook visibly. "I have nothing else. I only have you." My heart clenched painfully, and I pulled her into a tight embrace. "You fool. It's me who only has you." We slept in each other's arms that night, like two wounded animals licking each other's scars. But Liu Ryan's poison had left a thorn in Sue's heart. She became hypersensitive. If I was even 10 minutes late, she would pace the floor in a restless panic. If a female customer chatted with me for too long, she would quietly withdraw into the shadows. I noticed the shift, but had no idea how to heal the rift, until one night, I woke up in the darkness to find her side of the bed empty. She was curled up in the corner of the balcony, weeping silently under the cold moonlight. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her from behind. Her body tensed instantly, then she immediately went limp, burying her face deep into my chest. Sue, let me tell you a story. I told her about my father and my mother, about my brother and Liu Qingshu. I described the rotting decay hidden beneath that glamorous, hollow shell. I never believed in love. I thought it was all just a cold transaction of interest. But you are different. I gently brushed away her lingering tears. You make me feel like life actually has a touch of humanity left. She lifted her head, and under the silver moonlight, her eyes looked like polished obsidian submerged in water. She reached out, tracing the line of my eyebrows, my eyes, and the bridge of my nose before her fingers finally rested on my lips. Then, she leaned in and gave me the softest, most delicate kiss. It was a pure, untainted kiss, devoid of any raw desire, like the first snowflake of winter landing on a palm. I froze for a heartbeat, then leaned in to respond. In that kiss, something within us quietly melted away. The thorn that Liu Ryan had planted in her heart was silently and completely uprooted. Our lives finally regained their peaceful tranquility. But danger always lurks in the shadows. One afternoon, an uninvited guest arrived, Liu Qingshu. 5 years had passed, and she looked more elegant and regal than ever, dressed in a bespoke designer suit. She looked utterly out of place in our humble bakery. She had not brought any bodyguards. She was entirely alone. When her gaze landed on Sue, it was filled with a calculating, icy coldness. So, this is the life you've chosen, playing house in a dump like this with a mute. I immediately pulled Sue behind me. Say what you came to say and get out. She ignored me, pulling herself up to a chair. Ziyu, you're still as naive as ever. I recently dug up something quite fascinating regarding the true identity of your little wife. Sue suddenly gripped my arm with a death stare. Liu Qingshu slowly and deliberately opened her clutch, pulling out a yellowed photograph and sliding it over. The photo depicted a young man and woman, and the man's features bore a striking resemblance to Sue. The woman in the photo was cradling a small infant. Your grandmother never told you, did she? She shifted her gaze towards Sue, a cold, cruel smirk playing on her lips. Your parents didn't die of illness. It was a car crash, and the man who plowed into them was Zhang Xiaoyu. Ziyu, your father was driving drunk that night. The air in the room instantly turned to ice. My head began to throb with a deafening ring, and my legs felt like they were about to give way. Sue stared fixedly at the photograph, her face becoming as pale as a sheet of paper. Are you surprised? Liu Qingshu stood up, looking down on us with absolute disdain. Zhang Xiaoyu, your father slaughtered her parents, yet here you are, playing the devoted husband. The irony is all almost too much to bear. Shut your mouth, or I will end you right here, I roared, but my voice shook. Liu Qingshu leaned close to Sue's ear, whispering chillingly, little sister, do you think he's only being kind to you out of sheer guilt? With that, she turned and strolled out of the shop, leaving behind a suffocating, hellish silence. Sue stood frozen, looking as though her very soul had been completely hollowed out. I reached out, desperate to comfort her, but she recoiled as if shocked. Her gaze was completely vacant, looking at me like a stranger. Sue, please let me explain. I didn't. She suddenly shoved me aside and bolted upstairs, slamming the attic door shut and locking it tight. I chased after her, pounding on the wood with everything I had, but there was nothing but silence from the other side. Finally, a scrap of paper slid out from under the door. On it were a few shaky, jagged words, I need to be alone. I sat against that door until the sun came up, listening for any sign of life. I knew she was awake, suffering there in the dark. The next day, Sue didn't come down to open the shop. I made some porridge and carried it up, only to find the door still bolted. The third day passed, then the fourth. Nothing changed. She stayed entombed in that room, refusing to eat or drink. The bomb Liu Qingshu detonated had completely shattered the fragile world we had worked so hard to build, leveling it to the ground. While Sue remained locked away, I felt like a caged predator, pacing restlessly through the confines of our tiny shop. Bags of flour lay scattered across the floor, and the baking tray still held the charred remains of burnt cookies. A sour, suffocating stench of despair filled the air. Countless times, I wanted to storm upstairs and smash through that thin wooden door. But every time I saw the scraps of paper she slid out, those increasingly jagged pleas to leave me alone, my hand would lose its strength and fall to my side. I was terrified that my presence would be the final straw that broke her. This crushing helplessness was far deeper than when my family empire collapsed. Back then, I at least had the right to be furious, to curse the world, and the freedom to just pack my bags and disappear. But now, I did not even have the right to be angry. The perpetrator's blood ran through my own veins. Liu Qingchu had struck my most vulnerable defense with surgical precision, using my guilt as a weapon. Late on the fifth night, a muffled, pained whimper came from the attic. It sounded like a wounded animal crying out. Then came the dull thud of something heavy hitting the floor. My heart stopped. I cast all hesitation aside and kicked the door open with the spare key. Sui had collapsed beside the bed, her face a ghastly shade of gray, her lips cracked and parched. A spilled cup lay nearby. It seemed she had tried to reach for a drink but did not even have the strength for that. After days without a bite or drop, her body had finally broken. I lunged forward and scooped her up. She felt as light as a feather, as if she might dissolve into thin air. Sui, Sui, I tapped her face, my voice trembling uncontrollably. Her eyelids flickered, slowly cracking open to reveal a sliver of sight. Her vacant gaze landed on my face, completely devoid of focus. In that instant, I was terrified she was slipping away, terrified I would never get the chance to atone. I bolted downstairs like a madman, hurriedly warming up some porridge and mixing tepid water. I gently pried her lips apart, using a tiny spoon to carefully feed her. She swallowed mechanically, her gaze still drifting and unfocused. After managing to feed her half a bowl, I brought over hot water to tenderly wipe her haggard face and her freezing cold hands and feet. Throughout the entire process, she remained as limp as a doll, letting me move her at will. Only the occasional tear trailing from her eye proved she was still holding on. I tucked her back under the covers, collapsing onto the bed beside her. I held her tight through the blanket, not daring to sleep, terrified that if I closed my eyes, she would simply vanish. Sui, I whispered, my voice raspy and broken, I know you can hear me. You have every right to hate me, to blame me for everything. Do whatever you want, but please, you cannot die. If you leave, what is left for me? I, Zhang, have lived for over 20 years. I have done my fair share of terrible things, but I never once intended to hurt anyone. I will own my father's sins. If killing me would satisfy your grudge, I will hand you the blade right now. I grabbed her hand and pressed it hard against my chest. But you cannot punish me by destroying yourself. Your grandmother fought tooth and nail to raise you. She didn't do it just for you to end it like this. Do you remember that croissant you gave me? It was the bitterest, yet sweetest thing I have ever tasted. Bitter because I was at rock bottom, but sweet only because of you. The shop is named Glimmer. You are the one who lit it up. If you are gone, the light goes out, and my world will be pitched into total darkness. I don't know how long I kept talking, until my throat was parched and raw with pain. The body in my arms remained silent, though her breathing had finally stabilized. When dawn broke the next morning, I moved to get up and prepare more food, but a cold, frail hand suddenly hooked onto my sleeve. I spun around instantly, our gazes finally locking. Though her eyes were still swollen and red, a tiny spark of light had returned to them. She stared at me intently, her lips fluttering without producing a sound, but her mouth clearly shaped the word, water. I practically scrambled on all fours to get it, my hands shaking so violently I spilled half the glass. After taking a few desperate sips, she leaned back against my chest and closed her eyes. Tears traced down her cheeks once more, but this time it wasn't that hellish, silent despair. It was a vulnerability born of sheer exhaustion. She was finally letting me back in, and that realization nearly moved me to tears of joy. What followed was a slow, agonizing process of repair. Sui's physical strength gradually returned, but the trauma in her soul was far from healed. She became unnervingly quiet, sinking into a silence deeper than ever before. She still helped me manage the shop as usual, but her movements were sluggish, robotic, often spacing out while staring at the mixing bowls. In the dead of night, she'd still bolt awake, drenched in a freezing, panicked sweat. Whenever I held her close, I could feel her heart hammering like a trapped bird. She stopped using her notebook to talk to me altogether. On the rare occasions she communicated, it was through simple gestures. I knew deep down that the thorn was still embedded in her heart. Liu Qingchu's words were like a slow-acting venom, corroding every ounce of trust in our relationship. she began, instinctively flinching away from my touch. When I served her food, she would freeze for a beat before taking the bowl. At night, when I tried to pull her close, she would just stiffen and turn her back to me. This calculated distance was more suffocating than any screaming match. I understood her inner turmoil. She was reevaluating everything we had built. Was my help, my proposal, and my love all just a byproduct of some belated, guilt-ridden attempt to pay off a blood debt? The turning point finally arrived one quiet afternoon. An elderly regular who always bought our whole wheat bread handed us a thick, weathered envelope with trembling hands, explaining that her son abroad had sent back some local specialty biscuits. She insisted on thanking us for our care. Sue couldn't refuse and finally accepted. "Sweetheart, you and your man are truly good people. In this day and age, honest business owners are a rare breed. You two must stay happy and stick together." The elderly woman patted and clutched Sue's hand warmly. After she departed, Sue stood behind the counter, clutching that box of biscuits for a long time. Sunlight filtered through the window, dancing on her downcast lashes. I watched her from a distance, not daring to intrude. Suddenly, she turned around and walked straight toward me, handing me the box of cookies. Then she pointed to the box of old keepsakes in the corner. Inside were a few photos from our wedding day, along with the treasure she cherished most. That tattered notebook where I had once scrawled the terms of our insurance contract. I was momentarily stunned, but I quickly grasped what she was trying to do. I walked over, dug that old notebook from the box, dusted it off, and handed it to her. She flipped to the last blank page, picked up a pen, and began writing. Her hand was still shaking, but each pen stroke was slow, deliberate, and heavy. "I had a dream about my parents," she wrote. "They were in a bright, glowing place, smiling at me. It felt like they don't blame." At this point she paused, letting a dark pool of ink bleed into the paper. "Then," she continued writing, "I have wondered if you were only kind to me out of guilt. If so, why was there only annoyance in your eyes when I was caught stealing bread, and zero pity? Back then, you just made a quick call to sweep away an inconvenient nuisance, and why, the moment I agreed to marry you, did you freeze up, only for the tips of your ears to turn bright red?" She lifted her head, looking at me through a shimmering veil of falling tears. Her gaze held a deep confusion mixed with a tiny sliver of hope. She wasn't interrogating me, she was begging for an answer that could finally free her from the grip of this waking nightmare. As I looked into her eyes, it felt as though a gentle hand had finally eased the tight grip on my heart. I took the pen, writing beneath her words with deliberate care. "I have never claimed to be a saint. When I helped you back then, I didn't overthink it. Maybe I was just in a good mood, or maybe I wanted to avoid the extra hassle. Even my proposal wasn't because I was sure of love. I only knew that being with you felt grounded and peaceful. But now I understand completely. I cannot bear to see you cry. I cannot stand seeing anyone breathe a single word of disrespect to you. When you hurt, I wish with all my soul that I could take that pain from you. This has nothing to do with my father, it has everything to do with who you are. If I must feel guilt, my only regret is that I didn't cross paths with you sooner, saving you from years of bitter hardship. And I'm sorry I failed to protect you recently, letting my past drag you back into this deep sorrow." I handed the pen back to her. As she read my words, her tears fell even faster, yet the corners of her mouth twitched upward. It was a smile more painful to watch than any sob, yet it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. She gripped the pen again, and at the end of my writing, she added 3 powerful words: "I believe you." Then she set the pen aside and reached out on her own, gently interlacing her fingers with mine. Her fingertips were still cold as ice, but the steady strength of her grip instantly melted the lingering shadows in my soul. That night, she finally stopped turning away from me in bed. She curled up tightly in my arms like a tiny bird that had found its nest. Her breathing was steady, deep, and rhythmic. Listening to her soft breathing, I realized it was the most beautiful melody in the world. I knew the scar remained, and perhaps it would stay etched in our souls forever, but at least we were learning to live with it. Because we carried this heavy burden together, our bond became unbreakable. The decision to leave the city behind was made only a few days later. It wasn't just because of the threat Liu Qingshu posed, but because we desperately needed a new beginning, a place far from the dark shadows of our past where we could build a brand new life. Sue agreed without a single second of hesitation. To her, the truth was simple: anywhere I am is home. We sold the Glimmer Bakery, packed our lives into a few bags, and headed south. When neighbors learned we were leaving, they flocked to the shop to say goodbye, stuffing our bags with local treats and gifts. "Little girl, if that man ever treats you wrong, come back. This old lady will set him straight for you," an elderly neighbor sobbed, clutching Sue's hand. Sue nodded, her eyes red, as she pressed a final bag of cookies into her hands. On our final night before leaving, we cleared the last of our things from the attic. Sue pulled an old tin box from the wardrobe, holding her grandmother's most precious keepsakes, a few faded photographs and the joke insurance policy I had scribbled for her years ago. The paper had already begun to yellow, yet my ink remained stark and clear. "If I ever end up destitute, begging for scraps on the street, just remember to share a single bowl with me." She looked at those words and laughed softly, though her laughter quickly dissolved into silent tears. She picked up a pen, solemnly wrote a few words on the back, and handed it to me. "In this life, half of my bowl will always be yours." Tears blurred my vision as I pulled her close, holding her tight. "It's a deal, no backing out." As our train slowly chugged forward, the city holding so much of our shared pain and warmth gradually faded away. Outside the window, Sue fell asleep against my shoulder, her hand still gripping the hem of my shirt. Sunlight filtered through the glass, bathing her face in a peaceful, quiet glow. I leaned down to kiss the top of her head and closed my eyes. I have no idea what the future holds, but as long as she is beside me, we are home. We eventually settled in a quiet coastal town, using the money from the sale to open an even smaller bakery. We named it Twilight Hours. Sue handled the baking, while I managed the counter and greeted customers. Our life is simple, but it is blissfully peaceful. Slowly, she is stepping out of the dark shadows, and a real smile has returned to her face. Yet, in the dead of the silent night, she still jolts awake from a lingering nightmare. But I am always right there to pull her close, gently rubbing her back to soothe her mind, holding her tight until she drifts back into a peaceful sleep. One evening a year later, we were strolling hand in hand along the shore. The setting sun looked like molten gold as the tide washed over the sand. Suddenly, Sue came to a halt, pointing at something glittering in the surf. I reached down and picked it up, a fragment of sea glass, smoothed by waves, refracting the sunset into a warm, radiant glow. She took the piece of glass from me, steadying it against the light before placing it gently back into the center of my palm. She clasped my hand shut, telling me to keep it safe. I teased her, "Is this our new token of love?" She nodded quickly, her eyes sparkling with a fresh light. Then, one sweltering afternoon, the air was thick and humid, and our little bakery was completely empty. Sue was busy at the workstation prepping sponge cakes for tomorrow. I sat behind the counter balancing the books when I heard the faintest, most muffled sob. I looked up instantly to see her hand frozen over the whisk, staring blankly out the front window. Outside, a young father walked by with his little girl on his shoulders. Her sweet, ringing laughter filtered through the glass, echoing in the quiet room. I set aside the ledger and walked over. She didn't turn. Her gaze remained fixed on the retreating figures of the father and child until they finally disappeared around the corner of the alley. Her profile looked hauntingly pale in the harsh afternoon light. Her eyes held an expression I couldn't quite name, a painful mix of deep longing and raw, quiet sorrow. I gently touched her arm. She snapped back to reality and gave me a faint smile, shaking her head to say she was fine. Then she lowered her head, whipping the batter in the bowl with a sudden, frantic intensity, as if desperate to drown out her own thoughts. I knew she was aching for her parents, mourning a stolen childhood that should have been safe and filled with warmth. Instead, it was an empty void. Lu Chengsu's venomous words still remained like a hidden thorn, and even on the most radiant, sun-drenched days, the memories would unexpectedly pierce her heart. That night, after closing up, we sat on the back porch steps. We let the cool sea breeze wash over us, while the gentle waves lapped against the shore and distant fishing boats flickered like fallen stars. Sue leaned her head against my shoulder in a heavy silence. I took her hand, finding her palm uncharacteristically cold. "Sue," I finally broke the silence. "Do you want to go and see them?" She stiffened slightly, lifting her head to look at me in confusion. I mean your parents, I said, choosing my words carefully. I know where the cemetery is from the documents Lu Chengshu left behind. Let's go visit them. We can talk to them, tell them that you're living a good life now, and saying sorry for my father. Those final words felt like lead in my mouth, but they had to be spoken. I froze for a long, breathless moment. Tears rapidly pooled in her eyes, but she fought them back, refusing to let them fall. She stared deep into my soul, her gaze a storm of struggle and fear which finally settled into a quiet, firm resolve. She gave a slow, heavy nod. On a clear, bright morning, we closed the shop, and Sue carried a beautiful bouquet she had made herself from white daisies and green lisianthus. Walking into the suburban cemetery, the grounds were completely still, nestled against the mountains and facing the vast sea, a peaceful sanctuary for eternal rest. Following the file's details, we found the shared headstone. The monument was modest, bearing the etched portrait of Sue's parents, their faces now faded and blurred by time. Sue approached the grave, kneeling to gently lay the flowers. She reached out a shaking hand, using her fingertips to meticulously wipe away the thick dust and fallen leaves. Her touch was so gentle, as if brushing a fragile dream. She did not break down, simply continuing her silent, rhythmic cleaning. The morning sun lit up her focused profile, giving her a serene, almost sacred look. I stood behind her, giving her space with her parents. After a long silence, she finally stood up, turned around, and gestured for me to join her. I stepped up to stand beside her before the headstone. The ocean breeze ruffled our hair and clothes as Sue looked at the headstone and then turned to me. She raised her hands and began signing, her movements slow, as if every single gesture carried the full weight of her soul. Mom, Dad, this is Zhang Xiaoyu, my husband. She paused for a moment, taking a deep, steady breath before signing again. He treats me with so much kindness. We have our own little shop now, twilight hours. Life is peaceful here, and I am truly happy. We know everything about the past. Her signing grew slightly heavier, yet remained firm. It was a terrible accident. I know it was not Xiaoyu's fault. He is nothing like his father. She looked directly at me, tears finally tracing a silent path down her cheeks. With a faint smile, she kept signing to the grave. So please, do not hold a grudge against him, and do not worry. I am genuinely happy now. I really am. Watching her introduce me, defend my character, and declare her own happiness made a lump form in my throat, making it incredibly hard to breathe. My eyes burned with inch tears. Reaching out, I firmly held the hand she was signing with. Facing the headstone, I gave a deep, solemn bow. Standing back up, I locked eyes with the blurred faces in the photograph, speaking with absolute resolve. Uncle, Auntie, my name is Zhang Xiaoyu. I am deeply sorry, and I am eternally grateful. Thank you for bringing Sue into this world. Please rest in peace knowing this. As long as I draw breath, I will never let her suffer another day in her life. I will protect her with everything I am. Spoke each word slowly, letting them come straight from my soul. Verbal promises often feel hollow, but this was the only vow I could offer them. When we finished, we walked hand in hand down the cemetery slope. On the way home, Sue seemed remarkably light-hearted, as if she had finally shed a crushing burden carried for years. She even pointed excitedly at the roadside wildflowers, signing with newfound energy. She suggested using the petals and leaves to extract natural pigments for her baking. From that day on, I sensed a profound and subtle shift within her. The lingering sorrow in her eyes and that faint shadow finally dissipated. Her smiles became more radiant and unburdened. She began actively mapping out our future together, deciding which flowers to plant in front of our shop, and discussing how we might rent the space next door to expand our business. She even signed to me one evening, musing that perhaps we could adopt a child one day. I realized our pilgrimage to the grave was not just about comforting her parents. It was a turning point for us both, a final farewell to our haunting past. We can never rewrite tragedies, but we can choose how we face the horizon. We took that twilight hour, once overflowing with bitter memories of regret and pain, and poured it all away. In its place, we filled our lives with understanding, forgiveness, and the sweetness of the life we slowly built, savoring every drop of the days we have left. Late one night after the shop closed, we sat by the shore, watching the sunset paint the ocean in a breathtaking crimson flare. Sue leaned her head gently against my shoulder and suddenly traced a few delicate characters into my palm. It was not sign language. Tracing with her fingertip, I carefully deciphered the words twilight hours. Heart full of joy, I lowered my head to kiss her hair, and then,